I don't want no oil, a spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Hello, and welcome back to For a Green Future. Could you tell us your name and the organization you're with?
Thank you so much for having me back. My name is Stephanie C., and I'm the co-founder of Roam Free Nation. We're an advocacy group that focuses mainly on protecting the Yellowstone buffalo, the last wild herds in the country. But we also work with our allies to help spread the word about other projects they're doing to defend wild nature.
We're glad to have you back.
Thank you.
There is big news regarding the Yellowstone bison. There's going to be a new Interagency Bison Management Plan, or IBMP. Before we get into the details, could you give us a little history? Why is a new plan necessary now? And how long has it been since the current plan was put into place?
Well, just to clarify things, it's not a new interagency bison management plan. This is Yellowstone specific. So this is Yellowstone's new bison management plan, and it mainly affects what they're going to do, how they will behave, how they will manage the buffalo. The interagency bison management plan, which was signed in 2000, is still in effect. This new plan from Yellowstone will still work within the parameters of the IBMP, but the IBMP expired in 2015. Yet they're still working under it because all the agencies and tribes that are partners in the plan can't come to consensus on a new plan. So Yellowstone is essentially trying to do something for themselves for how they will behave within the park boundaries with this new plan.
I see. Now, the last time we had you on the show, we talked about the terrible slaughter of bison that happened this past winter. Could you give us a quick recap of what happened at that time?
Yeah, sure. And the slaughter was not just capture for slaughter. The bulk of what we were calling a slaughter was all the hunting that took place just outside the park boundary, especially in the Gardner Basin. There were over 1,200 buffalo who were killed by hunters. It was a really big and hard winter. It came early. More than 4,000 buffalo migrated into the Gardner Basin, which is historic. A record since Yellowstone's been established anyway, and hunters took complete advantage of that, and they killed as many as they could, and a lot of them even extended their own hunting seasons so they could continue to kill while the buffalo were just trying to survive the winter and find food. And so it was intense. Almost 25% of the herd was killed. There are about 88 buffalo who are actually captured and shipped to slaughter, then another 280 plus who were captured. And these captures happen within Yellowstone National Park at the Stevens Creek Trap, but another 280 who were captured for quarantine, which is basically a domestication process. The buffalo have to go through all this testing and human handling, and they get stuck behind fences for a long time. They eventually get trucked to Fort Peck Indian Reservation, where they're again fenced in for a long period of time and tested until they are transferred to other tribes. But a lot of people think it's a solution to slaughter, but still buffalo get slaughtered when they go through that program because they're tested so often and handled so often. A lot of them will turn up positive for brucellosis, which is the problem. This whole issue is, so they say, is about. And when that happens, they get killed.
Effectively
And then,
a death sentence.
yeah.
Does the revised management plan do anything to stop that kind of slaughter or relocation in the future?
Not at all. In fact, it bolsters it. So there's some things, there's 3 alternatives that are being presented in this plan. One of them is business as usual, do nothing, no action alternative. The second one really puts a larger emphasis on what they're calling quarantine is the Bison Conservation Transfer Program. It's a go greenwash name, but it would increase that and also continue to allow Yellowstone to capture buffalo for slaughter and also encourage hunting by tribes and state hunters outside of the park. The third alternative, which is not perfect, but it's the one that we prefer, the one that Roam Free Nation supports, would put an end to capture for slaughter. But it's also written in there, it's if the circumstances were such that, let's say, lots and lots of buffalo are migrating, not many hunters were being successful, that they could again capture for slaughter. So though they say that they're going to cease slaughter for capture for slaughter, they still have that tool as an option. But it's still to even test that there wouldn't be capture for slaughter is a huge step in the right direction. The other problem,
an option in reserve,
right? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's like we said, it's a good step in the right direction, but it doesn't go far enough. And it also relies heavily on hunting outside the park, which would, if we go through a year like we did this past winter, these buffalo they're not going to survive. Migratory memories are going to be killed. Genetics are going to be disrupted. I mean, all kinds of bad things. And nobody wants to see that. It's a very frustrating issue. And these hunts prevent natural restoration. They prevent the buffalo from being even on the small areas of year-round habitat that they've been granted.
Right.
Yeah. So there's that.
The details of the new plan are not yet decided. There's several alternatives as to the exact minimum and maximum numbers of bison the Yellowstone Park will allow to live on the grounds. What are the numbers of these different alternative plans? Are they high enough to allow a healthy population?
No, I don't believe that they are. And the Yellowstone is managing or putting out these numbers for what the park can sustain and for what, with so little tolerance in Montana. And that's where these buffalo want to go in the winter and in the spring. They're trying to mitigate that. So their numbers are lower than what they actually could sustain within the park because the buffalo migrate in the winter. And if they have the numbers that they would like in the park, there would be so many buffalo migrating into Montana that it would pose a problem for those people who don't want them coming. But from, a biocentric perspective, it's not nearly enough. I mean, we don't want to stop buffalo at the park boundary at all. We want them to continue to grow in their population, want them continue to be able to roam further and further and further and restore themselves on the lands that are their birthright. But within this, DEIS is not going to address that. That's going to have to be more pressure on the state of Montana. And that's a hard nut to crack.
Are there other differences between the alternatives besides just the minimum and maximum number?
Well, yes, like I said, the first alternative would be business as usual. The second alternative puts more emphasis on the quarantine program. And the third alternative has the option for ceasing capture for slaughter. And the numbers, I have to look at our website here, but the numbers in let's see, an alternative one, which is pretty much no action. They are calling for maintaining 3,500 to 5,000 buffalo after calving. Alternative two is not much different, about 3,500 to 6,000. And alternative three is 3,500 to 7,000. So
not much difference at all.
Not much at all. And earlier in the phase of this EIS, the numbers that they put forth were much higher. And recently we learned, well, it was a couple of months ago, that the governor of Montana, Greg Giant, I almost said it, Gianforte, has threatened to sue Yellowstone if they don't drive the numbers down to 3,000.
Yeah.
But Yellowstone is holding firm at least 500 more than 3,000, upwards of no more than 7,000. Although this past winter, they said the park alone can sustain upwards of 10 to 11,000 buffalo.
That'd be amazing to see if we got that.
Awesome. It would be awesome, but they're not going to recommend that because of the winter migration that would occur and the numbers that would possibly walk into Montana. So ultimately, and I know we wanted to talk about this, even with this plan, even with if we get alternative three, what we really need is for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to list these buffalo under the Endangered Species Act. And we heard at the meeting that they are not expected to have a decision on that until 2026.
Oh,
yeah, so that's a long ways away.
There have been public online sessions talking about the plan, which you have attended. How do you think those went?
I mean, they were all right. I mean, a lot of people asked some pretty good questions. I asked a couple of questions twice because the answers were very vague. One of my questions was, what will change within any of these alternatives should the U.S. Fish and Wildlife determine a positive finding and list these buffalo under the ESA?
Right.
And they never really answered the question. It was all, well, we're working with them. We're going to work with them. We're going to work with them. It's like, well, we wanted to know how it would change I don't think it's going to change any capture for quarantine. I really don't believe that would change, but it damn sure better change the hunt. And because Yellowstone's not focusing on outside the park, they're not responding to that question in its entirety. So, but people did ask some good questions. There were some clarification, because another one of my questions was, why did Yellowstone backtrack on the numbers from the scoping phase and reduce the population?
Maximum, right.
And that was what was explained, is because they're dealing with what they know they can sustain within the park while still catering to livestock interests outside of the park. And so that became clear. Yeah, I mean, it went all right. You just got to type in questions. You didn't really have any face-to-face time with anybody,
right.
But they also, yeah. But, it was worth attending for sure.
Our reporters attended that first session. One thing we noticed was that the park officials kept emphasizing how happy they were with the status quo, with the way that things were going with the bison population currently. They felt that allowing the tribes to hunt as many buffalo as they could is a good thing. Is that feeling rooted in any kind of fact, do you think?
I don't know why they would feel good about that, because some of the good things that have happened over the course of the years is we gained year-round habitat on the west side of the park on and around Horse Butte. And so that put an end. There was no more capture facility there. That there used to be one, and it pretty much put an end to hazing, especially the big industrial hazing operations that would happen every spring during calving season. But because more and more of the hunting is being encouraged, the buffalo aren't able to utilize that habitat because they show up, and then the hunters show up, and either they get killed or they tiptoe their way and hightail it back into the park. And the same can be said over in the Gardner Basin. In 2011, We gained year-round habitat for adult bulls and seasonal habitat for family groups. But again, when they show up, as soon as they show up, all the guns come out. And so the buffalo either get killed or they turn around and run back into the park. And you know, a lot of the times when they run back into the park, the trap is only a mile away from the boundary where most of them are getting shot. So the habitat that we've gained for them, they really don't have much of an opportunity to use it as they should be able to. They're not really able to live, you know, without being threatened on a daily basis.
Has Yellowstone yet announced their mortality figures for the population as of last year?
Well, they did in April. They announced how many buffalo have been hunted and captured for quarantine and captured for slaughter. And where I have all those numbers, they're in my head, but the hunt took 1,258 buffalo, and that was
1,200.
1,258. And like I said, capture for slaughter killed 88 buffalo, which is one of the lowest. I mean, the year before was low too, but usually the Park Service would capture upwards of 900 more, 1,600 one year. And then one thing we are waiting for, which is actually currently happening, is the summer population estimate to figure out who's left, including all the newborn calves this year. And we know right now Yellowstone's bison biologist, Chris Jeremiah, is flying around until I think September 5th to do those counts. So we should have that information pretty soon.
That's good. The name of your organization is Roam Free Nation. Does the current Yellowstone plan bring the bison any closer to being able to roam free? We've talked a lot about their boundaries being impeded.
Exactly, because as soon as they walk out of the park, they're met with a wall of rifles. So there's no freedom there. And I mean, and the hunters are a lot of the people, the same people who they love the buffalo too. And we understand hunting buffalo. We're not opposed to hunting buffalo. This hunt is so wrong. I mean, these buffalo are being considered for ESA listing. But you can't say, and they say, we want more buffalo on a larger landscape. You can't say that and then behave in the manner that you do, because it's never going to happen. You know what I mean? I mean, you're a wall of rifles and they can't get through it.
If the public wanted to participate in this process and make comments on the new Yellowstone plan, how can they do that? And do you have any suggestions for what they can say?
Absolutely. I just go right to our website, roamfreenation.org. The very first thing you'll see is a link to our take action about this draft EIS. And we do have a long list of suggested talking points and all the information to send in your comments, which are being accepted through September 25th of this year. So we have about 5 weeks, maybe 4 now at this point. And we really hope that a lot of people will comment in support of alternative 3. And, you know, don't just cut and paste what we wrote down. Please put things into your own words, because that's what counts. You know, sometimes if the any agency gets what looks like cookie cutter comments, they'll group those together and count them as one. And we don't want that to happen. So use our suggested talking points, but put them in your own words and share whatever else you feel about this issue and the buffalo and any experiences you may have had. And again, that's just right on our homepage at roamfreenation.org.
What's your reaction to the recent trend of the media to put a spin on the bison population? For example, emphasizing how bad bison are for the trees, or how they eat saplings and graze voraciously. How do you react?
Well, I like the word spin on that, because this is coming from an ag school from Oregon State University. It's a bunch of baloney. I mean, you talk to Yellowstone, that was brought up even at the second webinar, and Yellowstone, I mean, as we know, the earth chose the buffalo to be the caretakers of the grasslands and the prairie ecosystems, and they're not destroying habitat. If there's ever a time where any buffalo is harming the land, it's human cause. It's because they're fenced in, or because but these buffalo, they're not fenced in until they get to the park boundary. Well, just beyond the park boundary. But it's a lot of baloney coming probably from rancher interests. The timing of it is pretty interesting, given that Yellowstone is trying to at least a little bit increase the population.
Right.
But, and if people would stop killing so many wolves on the park boundary, we'd have more wolves in Yellowstone, and more wolves would be able to eat more buffalo.
And again, that'd be amazing to see.
Wouldn't it?
Well, thank you, Stephanie, for your time. How can people get more information about Roam Free Nation?
Oh, thank you so much. And yeah, just visit our website. And we are also on Facebook, Roam Free Nation. We also have a little Facebook group called Buffalover's, and you can find us on Twitter as well as Instagram. Yeah.
Anything final for our audience before we go?
Please, please, please take the time to make comments on this draft environmental impact statement. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's huge, and it's a big deal. And the more people who comment in favor of alternative 3, the better.
All right. Thanks again to Stephanie.
Thank you so
Stephanie
much.
C.
No. I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more 3-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done.